Greetings to all of those tuning in to Good News Community Radio today. This is Vaughan, aka the Cyber Hitchhiker, and it is really awesome to be able to be on the Good News Community Radio airwaves on the 93.6 FM frequency. It's been a while since I've been on air with Good News Community Radio, and it's awesome to be with you guys for a couple of minutes. As we know, in August, we have just celebrated Women's Day on the 9th of August. But it doesn't end there. August is Women's Month. And although we shouldn't just be celebrating women, I think, for 1 month out of the year, it does give us 30 days to highlight a lot of things that are going on in our society, and we can bring this closer to home to South Africa. And for me, when I speak about these things, it is always extremely shocking because, as we know, we live in a country where, according to the statistics anyway, we are supposed to be 80% plus a Christian country. But when you look around in our society, you look at our government, you look at our schools, you look at our communities even, you would battle to go and look around and say, but 80% Christian, then what is going on? Where are the Christian values? Where are the biblical principles that we are supposed to be portraying in our lives as Christians? And if we are doing that and we understand our Bible just a little bit, especially if we go to the New Testament and we read in the book of Acts how the early church behaved and what they were supposed to be doing, as in living out their faith Monday to Saturday, not just going to church on a Sunday. I think for many people in those days, especially in the early church, for the first 10 generations anyway, after Christ, after Paul and all these guys, but for those first 300 years, I think going to church would have been a weird way of looking at it, because the people back then, or as they were called, the ecclesia, which was an underground church movement or a gathering of people, got nothing to do with the building. They lived out their Christianity, they lived out church, which we do normally. It's confined to a couple of hours on a Sunday and maybe 1 or 2 days out of the month when we go and do a bit of community work. They lived out their faith Monday to Saturday, and that early church toppled an empire, changed the way the Romans saw and did things from the inside out, even through crazy persecution, because they were an underground faith. They weren't even a legitimate faith until around 313 AD, I think, was when the Edict of Milan was signed and Christianity became a legal form of religion in the Roman Empire anyway. But I digress. We are here to talk about Women's Month, and we can't talk about Women's Month without, well, for me anyway, highlighting what is wrong with our society today. And although we want to honor the strength, the resilience, and the beauty of women in our nation, which is obviously very true, because we know that, especially for me, although I'm down in Cape Town now, I am a Durban boy, and all my family and friends are in the Indian communities in Durban, which Good News Community Radio has been a part of for a very long time. So shout out to all my family in Durban, for all the members of Cares Church and my pastor, Pastor Aaron Munsami, and everyone else that I know, the Verulam Ministers Forum and all the guys that are part of that, the pastors that do such amazing work in the communities there, and their wives. Let's not forget that behind every great pastor, there's even a greater wife that supports him. So even with all of this, when we look at the stats in South Africa regarding the craziness that goes on in our country, the statistics that I'll be sharing today are extremely sobering. But I'm doing this for a reason, guys, because these need to serve as a reminder of why we need to fight, as Christians even, for gender equality. And we're not talking about the nonsense of all those other genders that are going on. We are talking about women's rights, men's rights, children's rights, the rights of the family, and the safety of that, and why it needs to be upheld. Because, as we know, family is a pillar of God's word. God created Adam and Eve to go out and multiply and be fruitful. and be a family, husband, wife, and children. And this is the center of God and everything that he speaks about in the Bible. But let's look at some sobering facts. And I only do this because I really do want to shock you, because sometimes being shocked is the only thing that really helps us to get out of our comfort zones, get out of our chairs, and actually start doing something. On an individual level here, guys, I'm not talking about big organizations that have got lots of money. I'm talking about every time we get up as Christians and we walk out of our front door. What are we doing? Are we highlighting these things or explaining that the reason these things are so prevalent in our country is because we are taking out God and biblical principles from everything that we are doing, from the workplace to the school place, and dare I say, and even some of our churches. We are speaking less and less about God and more about motivation and feeling good. But let's start with the big one that everyone likes to talk about, the big three letters GBV, which is gender-based violence. And in South Africa, this is one of the staggering stats for me, because we know that just over half, we could say around 51% of all women in South Africa have experienced gender-based violence. And perhaps even more shockingly is that, according to the stats, we have around 76% of men who have admitted to perpetrating such violence. Now, we've got to remember that these statistics, they are not just numbers. Let me just explain this to you right now. You can't just say that they are numbers. These statistics represent mothers, they represent daughters, they represent sisters, and they represent friends of ours. So consider this. I mean, for every 3 hours in South Africa, a woman is murdered. That's right, one woman is murdered every 3 hours. This gives us one of the highest rates of femicide, which is what it's called, in the world. And let me give you another shocking stat. One woman killed every 3 hours in South Africa is 5 times the global average. That's how far ahead of the rest of the world we are when it comes to the killing of our women in this country, murder, femicide. Each one of these women that are killed has dreams, has aspirations, has loved ones who count on them. They are mothers, they are wives, they are sisters, and they also represent an irreplaceable loss once they've been murdered. There is a hole that is left behind. I mean, domestic violence alone in South Africa sees around 200,000 women reporting violent physical attacks to the police each year. Now, this is the reported physical attacks, 200,000 women. I mean, you can divide that by 365 for yourself and realize how many women this is a day that are being physically attacked. And I mean, I get emotional because these are not just tragic numbers. The reason why I do this and give you guys these stats is because this should be a serious call to action. If this does not motivate us to do more in our communities as Christians, then I don't know what else can. I mean, just to put it in perspective, you know, it's essential to remember that women have fought and continue to fight for change throughout history. We've had strong women. And if we want to bring this home to South Africa, we can remember way back in the day, Charlotte Maxeke, a pioneer of the South African women's movement. And this was in the early days when women had hardly any rights, and you still had the colonial apartheid regimes that were coming into play. And that was a little bit later after this. But in 1913, she led one of the first women's marches to protest against the incoming pass laws, which was an early precursor to what happened in the 1950s, where there was mass mobilizations of people, and women especially, who were standing up and saying no to the pass laws in South Africa. Her courage laid the groundwork for future generations to rise up and demand their rights as women. And it's important to remember these people, but we've also got to understand that gender-based violence doesn't just take a toll on the individual. These murders that happen to women, this violence that happens to women, it has a significant economic impact as well. Now, I mean, we know that we have got serious corruption in South Africa, but let's just look at the amount of money that has to be spent. So South Africa spends between 28.4 and 42 billion rand per year because of gender-based violence. This is almost 1% to 1.3% of our gross domestic product, our GDP. Now, imagine what could happen with that money if we could invest that in education, not into the government's pockets or underneath couches where they like to keep all this cash, but really reinvest it in education, healthcare, economic opportunities for women, instead of having to deal with this aftermath of violence that is so prevalent in our societies in South Africa. I mean, we can talk about this all day. Let's go to another stat, teenage rape, which is another critical issue here in South Africa. We have some of the highest rates in the world. 1 in 5 children in South Africa falls victim to sexual abuse, including rape. 1 in 5 children. In the period of a year between 2019 and 2020, we had over 24,000 children sexually assaulted. And we know that these figures are actually much, much higher due to underreporting because our systems are broken. It's heartbreaking for me to know that so many of our young girls can't just focus on being girls because they are facing such horrors. And these horrors often take place within spaces that are meant to be safe. As a good friend of mine, Tertia de Klerk, who is the founder and director of the Joseph Movement, which is a non-profit that deals with human trafficking in the country. She'll often tell you that they don't tell people to stay away from strangers anymore because it's the strangers that are often helping people out of human trafficking because people are being trafficked by family members. So, like I said, these girls are facing these horrors. These children are being raped in the confines of a space that is meant to be safe. Like at school, from teachers, at home, from uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever. It's estimated that 22.2% of school children have been victims of violence, including sexual violence. Come on now, guys. These are supposed to be schools that are supposed to be safe, providing life skills and education to our children. But even in the face of all of these overwhelming challenges, we still see women rising up. We see mothers. We see women in our communities becoming strong leaders and taking ownership and standing up for what is right. Now, I know that I'm speaking all doom and gloom, and we don't have a lot of time, so I can't really go as far as I want to go. But let's just focus on 2 ladies. These ladies were women of faith, and they made significant contributions to society. Now, I might be using 2 ladies here that no one's ever heard of because I'm not using the normal people, but I just want to, there's a lady, there was a lady named Esther Mshlangu. She is mostly known as an artist, Mama Esther Mshlangu, if I have to be correct in the way she was called. And she was a devout Christian, and she used her faith to inspire her work and her community. And for those that might say, well, we've never heard of this lady, well, I guarantee you've seen her work. If you guys know the Ndebele tribe or nation who do those brightly colored artworks on the side of their buildings, on the side of their huts, she was the lady that started putting that art onto canvas. And her work was recognized globally. And it was her faith that guided her in this, in preserving and promoting her culture underneath Christ, while uplifting and mentoring young women in her community and helping them to be able to use this art form to create an income. We've got another lady, Sister Abigail Ntleko. I hope I said that right. But Sister Abigail was a nurse, and she was an author. She wrote a memoir, and she devoted her life to caring for orphaned and vulnerable children in the Underberg area in KZN. And these were HIV/AIDS children. She adopted, it was just over 30 children. And if you read her story in her book, she speaks about why she never got married, because by the time she was finished studying and doing everything she needed to do, she was well past 35. And all the men that were available were all too young for her, so she decided to stay single. But that didn't stop her from being a mother. And I get emotional about this as well, because, I'm an adopted child. I don't know my real parents. If it wasn't for someone, my adopted mother, who is my real mother, taking me in, I probably would have been aborted if it was illegal in 1978 to do abortion. Thank goodness it wasn't, because I'm still here today. But she adopted 30 children, all HIV/AIDS children, probably orphans, and she looked after them. And she helped thousands of others through her projects that she created in the Underberg area. And these women, although people might not advertise it openly, when you read their stories, it was through their faith that they made a difference in their communities and inspired people to pursue justice, compassion, and service. This is what being a Christian is all about, not just going to church, but doing something during the week, doing something because you are called to a higher purpose as a Christian. We've got to remember that change begins with us, not with the world. It starts in our Christian homes, in schools and communities where Christians are, where we've got Christian teachers, and for those students that are willing to stand up for their faith in our schools, that's where it begins. We need to be the ones raising awareness, supporting the survivors, challenging everything that is thrown at us. And only then can we create a South Africa where everyone can stand together under God, not just in Women's Month, but every single day to build a better South Africa for all women. And not just all women, but for everyone as a community, as a society. But we are focusing specifically on women. Now, as we continue this discussion, during this seriously important month, which is Women's Month, because we can raise awareness in these 30 days, I wouldn't be me if I wasn't bringing up one of the things I speak about the most, and that is addressing the critical issue that affects women and girls in South Africa, and that is teenage pregnancy and what comes with teenage pregnancy, guys, abortion. And in society, they will say these topics often carry a heavy stigma, and I would go a little bit further and say even in the church, these topics carry a heavy stigma because they are not spoken about enough, and people are still scared to stand up and ask for help when they are in these situations. Yet they are still a reality for many of our young women in our country, our beloved country that we call South Africa. Now, the statistics on teenage pregnancy is alarming. I mean, the highest prevalence is among 19-year-olds, but that is just a very broad story. Teenage pregnancies in South Africa increased by almost 30,000, from over 130,000 in the 2017-2018 year. Leading up to 2022, there were just over 152,000 teenage pregnancies year in and year out. Even more troubling with the rise in these pregnancies amongst guys, and I'm speaking about very young girls here, to basically call them mothers almost is sickening to me, because we are talking about girls that are aged between 10 and 14. That's right. Imagine a 10-year-old girl pregnant. I mean, it freaks me out. But these births have increased by nearly 49% over the same period between girls 10 and 14. From March 2021 to April 2022 alone, we had 90,000 girls aged between 10 and 19 giving birth, registering as mothers. These figures highlight not only the widespread issue of teenage pregnancies, but also the vulnerabilities that these young girls face. I mean, how many of these girls do you think actually wanted to fall pregnant between these ages and knew what they were doing, or were being taken advantage of by older men, uncles, whoever it was, school teachers even? I mean, in 2020, we had 33,000 girls. Like I said, I don't like calling them mothers because it freaks me out, age 17 and younger, with over 600 of them being aged between 10 and 13 again. I mean, come on. I mean, these numbers are absolutely heartbreaking and have to remind us of the urgency that is needed in addressing both education and what it means to be a precious child of God as a young girl. You understand? I mean, the government will push reproductive health services on you because they are trying to make money, and they're trying to give you alternatives because they want to give you condoms. They want to tell you that it's okay to go, even if you're underaged, between the ages of 12 and 18, you don't have to get parental consent. You can just walk into a clinic if you are pregnant, and you can have a free abortion at a government facility, and you don't have to tell your parents about it. If you want to experiment, it's okay, use condoms. That is not the answer. The answer is that you are a precious human being. You are a precious girl. You are a precious woman. You are a precious somebody that was created in the likeness of our Almighty God. And He has a purpose and a plan for your life. You're not just a random particle of dust floating through the universe. You have a designated purpose. And if you have chosen Jesus Christ, you are called to a higher purpose. Now, before I start preaching, let's just get onto a bit of the abortion statistics, because as you hear with all of these young women that are giving birth, you have to go, well, Vaughan, there must be those that decide not to keep the baby. And when it comes to abortion, the statistics reveal even more complexity, because as we know, no one should be killing a baby that has done nothing wrong, and all it wants to do is basically be born and live its life. That life should not be snuffed out and taken away in sometimes the most horrible ways, depending on what procedures you are doing. But that's another topic for another day. That life deserves to be a life that is also precious if it is unheard and unseen inside the stomach. And we know with modern technology, we can see the most amazing 4D scans of how children, babies, are going from that very first cell to the complexities of what a child is just before it is born. It is a beautiful thing to see. But yet abortion is still pushed on us, and we are told that it's nothing more than a clump of cells. This does not just kill the baby, it hurts the mother. It has a ripple effect on the family surrounding that mother, and for everyone involved. As a father, and I call myself a father because I unfortunately have lost a child to abortion when I was away from God and I was living a life of craziness. I had a fiance who aborted my child, and her mother paid for the abortion because I was told that I'm such an evil, bad person. They didn't want another one of me running around in this earth. So they killed my child because of my sin. And I never got a chance to be, well, I definitely am a father. I just will only be seeing my child when I'm in heaven. I will have been robbed of, and we're going back to 2003, 2004, yeah, guys. So my child would have been 19, 20. I've been robbed of all of those years of being a parent, of being a father, just because abortion is legal. Now, that's me talking as a man who didn't even fall pregnant. I mean, I can only imagine what it must feel like for a woman who is a designated mother. When you look at what the Bible says about a woman, she has been created specifically to be able to have children. We all know, if we have to be honest, a man could never ever fall pregnant, and even if he could, he would not be able to handle the pain. Women are so much better at handling these kinds of things than a man. We just go and cry like babies, excuse the pun. But we have on average 260,000 abortions every year taking place in South Africa. And those are the reported abortions. And what the government likes to call unsafe abortions, which are basically girls who are going to backstreet abortion clinics, which is even worse. Even though the baby dies every time, you must understand that they told us that in 1997, when they made the Termination of Pregnancy Act became signed into law and abortion became legal, they were doing it to stop backstreet abortions. But yet 58% of all abortions in our country are still done through backstreet clinics. And this is horrific, because the consequences of an unsafe abortion is obviously the baby dies all the time, but are severe for the mother because she's putting her body through some horrendous violence. This leads to long-term health complications. Forget about the psychological complications of a mother who's killing her child, but it can also lead to death. And I was looking at some of the worst years on record for South Africa, and I mean, we can go back to 2015, where the World Health Organization estimated there were around 430,000 unsafe abortions in South Africa. Even though our government says there's around 260,000 averaging per year, we have ups and downs, and you must understand these are cases that are reported because of medical complications from the unsafe or backstreet abortion. So these are obviously much, much higher. So we can go 97 until now, over 6.5 million children have been killed in South Africa due to abortion. And again, the government will tell us that this highlights the critical need for accessible, safe, and legal abortion services. Nonsense. The abortion services that are legal are still just legalized institution for murder. And it's all about making money. They don't have the mother's best interests at heart. Now, Mary Stopes also, and I like to quote from the guys that are doing it, because then they can't backtrack and say, oh, but you found these stats somewhere else. They also say that there's around 58% of abortions in South Africa each year are still illegal. And they say it's due to the inaccessibility of legal services. I don't know so much about that. I think a person, if they're wanting to kill their child, whether you make it legal or illegal, it's a heart problem. You need to be speaking to that person about the preciousness of life, that they're not just a amoral animal running around on this planet doing whatever they feel like until they die and then going back to the dust, that they are a created being and they are here for a plan and a purpose, like I keep saying. And all of this stuff has led to this rampant thing that's happening now, where you can go onto various Facebook sites and various online sites, various social media platforms, and to websites, and you have the legal sale of Cytotec, which is the abortion drug that you can take, the pill. And these pills are now being sold on the street for over 1,500 Rand a pill. And this is still abortion, but you must understand the dangers of taking these pills off the street, buying them illegally, compound the problem, because you're putting yourself at risk, even though the child is the one that's going to be suffering the most and end up dying. But you could end up dying as a woman. The fact that you should be valuing yourself more. And this is where I say the onus stops with us. We should be teaching our young girls and our women in society that they are valuable and they are precious, and that they are loved and that they are wanted. We've got to ask ourselves as Christians, how can we, as a Christian in our society, do better? How can we ensure that our young women are not forced into this motherhood before they are ready, because the government says you can have sex from the ages of 11? We can teach kids from the ages of grade R now. If you look at the ECE toolkit that they give to teachers on how to teach kids in grade R and grade RR even, it's absolutely shocking, and that's another story for another day. But we need to be able to reflect on these issues during this month of August. Figure out what we can do as people, as Christians in our society, to make a change and make things better. And we have to remember that change is possible. We have a truth that the world does not have. The world turns to comprehensive sexuality education, improving access to reproductive health services, breaking down the stigmas associated with teenage pregnancy and abortion. We know that these are not the answers to anything that I've addressed today in the stats and what we've been talking about. We as Christians need to create a future where young women have control over their bodies and their lives by understanding that they are precious created beings and are children of God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and have a special purpose while here on earth. In this Women's Month, let us commit to being part of the solution. Whether it's through supporting local organizations, you stepping out your front door and making a difference as a Christian, our churches opening up our buildings, getting professionals in, providing critical services that are needed in our communities, becoming advocates for policy changes in the government, and by simply educating ourselves through what I've told you guys today and taking a stand and spreading this word to those around us. Every small step counts towards a safer, healthier future for our women and girls in South Africa. And that is all we have time for. And I just want to say, guys, it's always a pleasure to be with you on the radio, on the airwaves, on the digital platforms. For all those who tune into Good News Community Radio 93.6 FM, thank you for all of your support always and for your engagement. We love you, we cherish you, and remember, to all those women, girls, sisters, mothers, grandmothers, great-great-great-grandmothers even, you guys are loved. You have a special place in our society, and you have a special place in our Father's heart. and he only wants the best for you. And we as Christians need to be his instruments, providing those changes and providing what is needed to create a safer society for our most treasured possessions, and that is our women, our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers. This is Vaughan, aka the Cyber Hitchhiker, saying goodbye and God bless.